Thanks very much for now. Now, time for a look at the business news, and the man with the gloom today is Joe Lynam.
Yes, my black cape, I parked it outside there, yes, indeed. These are the business headlines this evening. Jobless numbers climb once again. Unemployment stands at 2.44 million. That's up 220,000 over the second quarter of this year. The city watchdog toughens up the rules on how and how much bankers should be paid in bonuses. And the Bank of England describes the green shoots of economic recovery as fragile. So, as expected, unemployment continues to spiral upwards. The officially internationally recognised measure says that there were 2.44 million, or 7.8% of the population, out of work in Britain, up 220,000 between April and the end of June. The claimant count is much lower, though. It was up 24,900 in the month of July to 1.58 million people. Well, joining me now in the studio is Thomas Usher, a research fellow at the Institute for Employment Studies. And in our central London studios is Richard Excel, the Senior Policy Officer at the TUC. Richard, can I start with you, please? What's your reaction to these news, to these numbers, given the fact that I think a lot of people expected the numbers to be a bit higher at this time 1 year ago?
Well, we're possibly beginning to see the point at which some of the numbers stop accelerating in getting worse. So we're a long way off the turning point yet. But we've seen a bit of variability from one month to another, so you know, we're not at a stage yet to say that we're even able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But things have stopped getting worse so quickly, perhaps.
Yeah, but for a lot of people, there's going to be darkness at the end of the tunnel, because most people expect the numbers to reach or breach 3 million.
You'd say 3 million is more likely than not. We've been thinking for a long time now that the chances are we're going to go over the 3 million mark. It's possible we'll go over 3.5 million.
Well, Thomas Usher is with us from the Institute for Employment Studies. Where do you guys think it's going to peak?
Well, we don't necessarily have a forecast of where it's going to peak, but I would definitely agree with the point that Richard was making about some signs of stability now starting to show. And we can certainly see that in two senses. First, in terms of job losses, where with the redundancies we can see in the second quarter they were fewer in number than in the first quarter. We can also see that in terms of job seekers are not allowed. So we can leave aside perhaps some of the discussions about the value of that figure, but we can see, if we look at it like a bus with people getting on and getting off every month, we have the same number of people getting on every month and increasingly more and more people getting off every month. So at some point that figure is going to peak. And
at some point that bus is going to be pretty full.
The bus will be full, but will not be getting much fuller.
And how much credit should be given to employers and employees for some of the creative ways that they have used over the last few months to keep the number of job losses at a minimum?
There is certainly some credit due, and in terms of people's careers with skills being maintained, and also in terms of the social dislocation that's avoided by avoiding job losses, that's all very commendable. What we can see now, showing in the figures, is nearly 1 million people working part-time who would rather be working full-time, and that, I think, is an indication both of the scale of the effort that's been made, but also of the drawback, because many people would like to be working full-time and earning a full-time wage.
Let me go back to Richard Excel from the TUC. Richard, the implication there is instead of 2.44 million people unemployed, it's 3.44 if you count all the people part-time who'd like to be full-time.
Well, yes, there's getting on for 1 million of those. And also, of course, there's people who are looking after family or disabled, but say they'd like a job, and there's over 2 million of them that we always have to take into account. So if you're looking at the number of people who haven't got a job and would like one, that's probably round about 4.5 million people.
Thank you very much. That is Richard Excel from the TUC, and with me in the studio, Thomas Usher from the Institute for Employment Studies. Thank you very much for joining us both. Now, new rules on how financial institutions should pay bonuses to their staff have been set out by the Financial Services Authority. It wants banks to change the way they pay their top employees in order to link bankers' pay deals far more closely with the long-term profitability of the bank. The FSA says that bonuses should not be guaranteed for more than a year and that senior employees will get bonuses spread over 3 years. Well, despite that, the FSA's clampdown on remuneration, shares in the banking sector actually ended up.
I think the reason that market is pretty good today, considering what you had from the FSA and what you had from the Bank of England, is does the market really believe that the FSA are going to be able to do anything about bank bonuses? And I think they've stepped back from that and actually said, no, they can't do very much. They can indicate, they can say they're not happy, they can say all sorts of things, but actually they're not going to do very much about it.
That's Elisa Baer there. Now, the Bank of England has forecast that the economy could shrink by as much as 5.5% this year before beginning its slow recovery. The bank said that the recession appeared deeper than previously estimated and warned that any recovery in 2010 would be fragile. Only last week it pumped another £50 billion of new money into the economy as part of its quantitative easing programme. And today the bank pointed to encouraging signs that its monetary stimulus package was in fact working.
The recession appears deeper than the MPC thought likely at the time of the May report. But as the impact of destocking has turned round and the effects of a lower exchange rate and the policy stimulus have begun to come through, the pace of contraction has moderated. It's likely that output stabilised in the middle of this year, and business surveys and other short-run indicators suggest that growth is more likely than not to resume over the next few quarters.
And that's the Governor of the Bank of England there, Mervyn King. Let's have a quick look at the markets before I pop off. As you can see, the FTSE closed up 1% at 47.16. The banks had a really good day, as Elisa Baer was saying. Have a look at the Dow. That's up 1.4%. Pretty buoyant mood in New York. They're expecting something relatively positive from the Fed. That's the central bank in the United States. The pound down 5 cents from its 9-month high against the dollar. That was only a week ago. So they don't really like the comments from the Bank of England saying that the economy is going to be a little bit more fragile than they had hoped, so that they're marking down the pound as a result.
OK, Joe, thanks very much for now.